Alright, what's happening, y'all? I planned on doing another video today, but then some really interesting news came out of nowhere for the Commanders. First of all, the Washington Commanders signed former Chiefs wide receiver Marcus Kemp, so Eric Bieniemy is already trying to do a little Washington Chiefs things. Mixed results from becoming the Washington Panthers. We'll see how this new Washington Chiefs movement goes, especially if we actually fully dive into it like we did with the Panthers. So far as just one wide receiver, couple of coaches. Again, I got to update y'all on those coaching hires, especially once we finally officially hire our wide receivers coach, so I can give y'all the whole rundown of everybody that got promoted, all of that type of stuff. But for today, we're just talking about Marcus Kemp and how he's going to impact the team. And then also, huge news for me especially, the Washington Commanders have officially interviewed 3 tight ends. Darnell Washington, which of course, I mean, y'all know how happy I am to hear that. And then Tucker Kraft and Brenton Strange as well. So I want to take a look at all of those guys, especially Darnell Washington, and talk about why tight end is such a big need for this team right now. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for all of the content, film sessions, more mock drafts, everything breaking news that comes out with the Commanders, draft, free agency. Make sure y'all stay tuned for everything, man. I'm super excited. Without further ado, let's get it. Alright, so first of all, let's go ahead and just look at the tight end position and see what we have going on. As of right now, technically, 53-man roster-wise, we're not going to expand it all the way to 90, even though I do want to add Curtis Hodges in there. If you want to talk about our 4 tight ends that are currently on the roster, you have Logan Thomas, John Bates, Cole Turner, Curtis Hodges, and then also add my boy Armani Rogers. That's 5. When you look at the Commanders depth chart, they only have Logan Thomas, John Bates, and Cole Turner, but they better put some respect on my boy Armani Rogers, because honestly, out of the 5, he's my favorite, especially ceiling wise. Which takes me to my point about this tight end group and why I feel like it's a very underrated need for this team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they trade back and end up taking one in the first, or at the very least taking one in the second. And we're going to take a look at the 3 guys that we interviewed today, or at least at some point during this combine, and especially look at what rounds they may go in, because that's pretty important as well. But as far as the Commanders go currently, I love the potential of this tight end group, but I'm not confident. I don't love the floor. Logan Thomas has somewhat of a floor, even though the floor and the ceiling looked like it declined last year. Maybe he can go back to his 2021 self. We can only hope. So that's not much to depend on. John Bates has a relatively high floor, but not much of a ceiling. And then you have Cole Turner, a lot of ceiling, not much of a floor. Armani Rogers, love him. Again, he's my favorite tight end out of the group. I feel like Eric Bieniemy with his creativity could get a lot out of Armani Rogers. I feel like he was drastically underutilized for this offense, but my boy Ivory brings up a good point that a lot of the reason that our tight ends were underutilized period was because our offensive line was so bad. We needed that additional 6th offensive lineman on the field, basically. Tight ends weren't allowed to go out there and run routes because our tackles and our offensive linemen needed so much help that they had to stay in line a lot of the time. Cole Turner, Armani Rogers, all of these guys that weren't even necessarily known for their blocking coming out of the 2022 draft, while Armani Rogers went undrafted. But basically, those guys are receiving targets, and we even had them out there blocking time after time, snap after snap. Logan Thomas is a decent blocker, but with as much as we asked him to block last year, he started to get exposed more and more. Now, of course, the tight ends were also underutilized because Taylor Heinicke just couldn't seem to find Logan Thomas to the last couple of games of the season. I mean, there was so many times Logan Thomas was open and Taylor Heinicke would throw it late, overthrow him, whatever. But either way, the offensive line also contributed to that. We just needed an additional blocker, and who better as an additional blocker than a 3rd tackle on the field in Darnell Washington? We're going to get to that later though. But as of right now, again, I feel like this is a very underrated need because the only floor that we have is John Bates. I feel like Armani Rogers may have a higher floor than people will give him credit for, but we got to see it to believe it type of thing. We got to see Eric Bieniemy utilize that guy, and I think he will fall in love with him. Armani Rogers has ridiculous athleticism. He was separating against starting corners at the NFL level early. Undrafted free agent, just moved to tight end during that offseason that we picked him up as an undrafted free agent. Those were his first couple of months of ever even trying to be a tight end. Whereas like Logan Thomas, for example, he played quarterback in college, but he was a tight end at the very least coming out of high school. Armani Rogers, I believe, was a quarterback his entire life until like March or maybe February of last year. and then we brought him in to be a tight end in April. Like, he's as raw as it gets for tight ends. And he, in the preseason, was separating against NFL starting corners, out there against starters with the starters, and making good catches. The potential is there, man. Receiving tight end wise, Armani Rogers, I feel like easily has the highest ceiling on this team currently. But either way, he doesn't have a very high floor. Right now, if we had to go into the season with Logan Thomas, who may get cut as a cap casualty to make some roster space to potentially sign Deron Payne or Cameron Curl long term, or to bring in an outside free agent, maybe even at tight end to add some floor to this tight end group. We have plenty of ceiling, but we need a little bit more floor. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move on from Logan Thomas, even though it would be a little strange that we already have a need there, and then you cut Logan Thomas to create an even bigger need while we still have needs at offensive line, cornerback, safety, linebacker. So we'll see how that goes. And then again, you have John Bates with the floor, not much of a ceiling. And then you have a pile of Cole Turner, Armani Rogers, and Curtis Hodges, who are all ceiling right now, but not much of a floor. So I could easily see the Commanders drafting a tight end within the first 2 or 3 rounds, easily, especially some of these guys that we interviewed that had come with floors. We talked to Darnell Washington, who according to the Draft Network is the 28th rated player out of their entire big board, very likely to go into the first round, especially after the combine these next couple of days where he tests, he runs, and all of that type of stuff. It can get dangerous. 6'7", 265 pounds, again, literally a third tackle on the field. He's literally almost 30 pounds heavier than Will Anderson. He's less than 10 pounds lighter than Miles Murphy, less than 10 pounds lighter than Tyree Wilson. He's the same weight as Keon White. All of these edge rushers that he would potentially have to block against, he's heavier than Lucas Van Ness. All of these potential edge rushers that he could go against at the NFL level that's coming out of his draft class with him, he's heavier than these guys, or within at the very least the same range. So he's literally a third tackle on the field, and he can catch. Not very consistent, but well enough, because I can't really see us telling Charles Leno to go out there, run a route, and catch a pass. That's the type of value that Darnell Washington brings. He's such a unique prospect, it's hard to even comp him to other players that have previously even existed in the NFL. And I just don't think you could really just find a Darnell Washington in every draft. So that's why I'm really enamored with the potential of drafting him. Of course, with them being a Georgia Bulldog, I want us to draft as many Bulldogs as possible. Even if you're not a Bulldogs fan, the same logic of drafting Alabama players because they keep winning championships, and then constantly drafting Ohio State players because they're always in the mix. Why not do the same thing with the Bulldogs? But we also interviewed tight end Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State, and he's the 49th ranked prospect on the Draft Network's big board, so we could potentially get him in the second round if we want to. And this guy is all ceiling, still pretty raw, didn't play against great level of competition, and we got to work on his hands a little bit, but that's the same thing that could be said about Darnell Washington. Inconsistent hands as well. But if we're talking about ceiling, like speed, size, strength, athleticism, receiving ability, potential blocking ability with better technique, Tucker Kraft's ceiling is actually quite insane, and I would be very happy to get him as well. And then lastly, we also talked to Brenton Strange, the 127th ranked prospect on the Draft Network's big board from Penn State. I mean, we already have Jahan Dotson, Tariq Castro-Field, Shaka Toney. Maybe draft Joey Porter in the first. And then Brenton Strange somewhere maybe like in the 3rd or 4th. And for a guy his size, he has great run after catch ability. He has really good hands, unlike Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington, again, inconsistent. So is Tucker Kraft. But Brenton Strange comes with really good hands. And one thing that he brings is that he's already dual threadable. 6'3", 250, the size and the strength to be able to block well in the run game. But even though he doesn't separate well and not like a great route runner, he has great hands. And then again, like I always say, man, I don't need my tight end to be able to separate on his own. If he can, that's great. That's an additional trait, but it's only like a handful of tight ends, maybe not even a full 5 that can separate on their own. All of these tight ends are out here getting schemed open by their offensive coordinators, by the play calling, by the play designs, and things like that. Travis Kelce, it may be only like a couple of other guys, Darren Waller maybe, are actually out here getting open on their own 1v1 against like DB, shaking them out of their socks and getting open. George Kittle is schemed open by Kyle Shanahan. Great tight end. Easily top 2, top 3 tight end in the NFL. But he doesn't even necessarily get open on his own. So that's not even like a thing that I really require in my tight ends. Now, of course, you would prefer if they have it, but it's not a necessity. Can you block? Can you catch? Those are like 2 of the most important things for sure. So there's some potential with these three guys that we've talked to. And of course, Darnell Washington, what he said in his interview, you already know Ron Rivera is smiling ear to ear, man. Because there's a picture of him going around when he was interviewed by Connor Rogers and he was asked about blocking, and Darnell Washington has the biggest smile on his face. And then he also mentioned in the same interview that he likes to watch Mercedes Lewis and Mark Andrews as tight ends at the NFL level. So, man, that interview alone might get him drafted by Ron Rivera. Now, moving on, the Washington Commanders signed former Chiefs wide receiver Marcus Kemp. He played 5 games for Kansas City last year, but he was primarily on special teams, including the Super Bowl. And then the first thing I thought was like, wait, we can sign free agents from other teams? But the reason behind that is that the Chiefs did not sign Kemp to a futures contract, thus making him an immediate free agent. So we don't have to wait till the new league year to start mid-March for him to become a free agent. We don't have to wait till the end of the 2022 season for him to become a free agent. That's why we can sign him right now. Because that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. But he's 27 years old, very young, still has some potential to him. And he spent most of his career in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy, but he's mostly here for special teams and, of course, intangibles off the field wise. He's going to be that guy that comes in and already knows what Eric Bieniemy is, who he is, how he coaches, all of that type of stuff. He's a guy that can come in and spread his message and his influence around the team a little bit quicker from the inside out as a player rather than a coach on the outside looking in. And this guy, I mean, he already has the endorsement from Jeremy Reeves, who, again, need I remind you, Pro Bowl special teams player, the #1 All-Pro voted special teams player. And he endorsed Marcus Kemp. He said, bruh is a dog on special teams, literally tweeted that. And if you want to know, one significant play to go look at is in the Super Bowl when Kadarius Toney had a 65-yard punt return in the fourth quarter, which was huge. Marcus Kemp had multiple key blocks in that return. Like, without him, that play doesn't happen. So Marcus Kemp is great on special teams. And then the most notable thing was when I really looked into him and looked at his height and his size and things like that, I was like, uh-oh, sounds like Cam Sims is done here. He survived a few coaching changes. He survived a couple of regimes, but Marcus Kemp sounds like the end of the road is near for Cam Sims. Shouts out to Ben Standig for doing a direct comparison. Thank you. They're both 27 years old. Marcus Kemp is 6'4", Cam Sims is 6'5". They both play wide receiver but contribute mostly on special teams. I mean, they're literally the exact same guy. But the difference is Kemp played for Bieniemy in Kansas City. Cam Sims did not. Kemp is under contract with the Commanders, and Cam Sims currently is not. He's a free agent. He's one of those guys that maybe we were looking into re-signing, but now after we brought in Marcus Kemp, I'm pretty sure Cam Sims is done in Washington, which I'm a little bit sad about because I still felt like he always got the bad end of the stick and was never utilized as much as he should have. But hey, man, Marcus Kemp, what he did on that one specific punt return against the Eagles in the Super Bowl was enough for me to be like, hey man, bring him along. And again, if you want to have that big body receiver, he's that guy, only an inch shorter than Cam Sims and a little bit more proven on special teams. Again, if Jeremy Reeves backs him, he must be doing something right. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. And as always, I appreciate all the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. I really appreciate y'all. Definitely get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about us signing Marcus Kemp to potentially replace Cam Sims. Who do you prefer between the two? Would you like to keep both? We already signed Marcus Kemp. Do you want to bring Cam Sims back? And then also, how do you feel about the 3 tight ends that the Commanders have interviewed at the Combine? Do you feel like we have a needed tight end like I do? I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.